loro sono di loro tre ancora oggi dopo 10 anni fanno solo.
Marco, possiamo iniziare?
Sì, vuoi.
Shall we start? Yes. Okay, this is going to be held in English. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce you to my good friend. Despite being a very good friend, he's also a great, tall, not just great, but even tall journalist. He lived multiple lives, and he's here with us today to talk about the very, very timely topic, I would say. Marco Bardazzi, in his first life, was an accomplished journalist. He was on the leading board of La Stampa, one of the most respected and historical newspapers in Italy, and then moved on to become vice president of Eni oil company, one of the most prestigious and biggest oil companies in the world, and then he moved out to being an entrepreneur. We invite him today for a couple of reasons. One reason is that he has been watching the development, even the revolution in information society. In 20 years, you're not that old, but I think mostly 20 years, he covered several presidential elections in the United States when he was working in Washington, D.C. for the ANSA, is that correct?
10 years? Yes.
10 years. And so he saw the development of new way of communicating and the impact of social media on communication. One of his books is about the latest news or the last news, depending on how we translate it. The other angle we would like to focus on is the impact of media and the impact of new information technologies on society at large and on economic activities. One of the things he's doing now, but I'm sure you're going to talk about that in a second, he is helping firms in Italy and elsewhere keep pace with the development of technology. And I think it's perfect time, even though it's very sad time, it's perfect time to have him here, because of course we have been seeing that war is both fought and told through social media. And so I think, Marco, you'll be giving us a perfect angle to look at what's happening nowadays and what, of course, overwhelming our lives. So I give the floor to you. You'll be speaking about 20-25 minutes, whatever is convenient to you, and then we will open the floor for discussions. As I said before, if someone is not confident enough to speak in English, you can just speak in Italian. We'll translate the question, but we'll do as much as we can to facilitate, even encourage dialogue. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Marco, for being here.
Thank you. Let's make half an hour. No,
half
25
good,
minutes,
good.
Okay. I'll try. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everybody. Also, people following from home. What I'm trying to do is to tell you what has happened while you were at schools or at kindergarten in the past 20 years, starting from when you were very, very young. Why this? Because what has happened in the past 20 years is kind of a revolution, and it's difficult to be aware of a revolution happening when you are living it. So let me start, first of all, Professor Pina has already introduced me. What I have done in the past 20 years, a few things. I was, at the beginning of the century, from 2000 till 2009-10, I was in the United States as a US correspondent for an Italian news agency, ANSA, which is the leading Italian news agency, and I was covering many things, as Andrea said, 3 presidential campaigns, couple of wars, the September 11 attack on the World Trade Center, but also, and most interesting for us today, the development of the digital industry, because in those years is when Apple exploded, the social media were invented, and so on. Then I moved back to Italy at La Stampa, and I was in charge of trying to get together the paper and the digital production, paper journalism and digital journalism, between 2009 and 2015, and that's another important part of our story because those were very important years. And then I moved to Eni, which is one of the biggest energy company in the world, and I have tried to change communications even inside this old-fashioned oil and gas company, and it was a very interesting experience. During my years at Eni, I have understood something more about how companies communicate, and we will talk about how brands are communicating today and why, what has changed from the past and why it's important today. So what I'm doing today is that thing here. I have a small company called Bea, which is because of Beatrice of Dante. So it's the most important influencer in the history of the Italian literature. But it's also be a media company. So Bea is actually a call to action. I'm helping companies to communicate using the tools of the journalist world. Now, I was talking about the past 20 years, but I need first to go back a little bit more than that. There have been 4 major turning point moments in the history of communications. So I'm going back a little bit because the first one was 30,000 years ago, the first time that men tried to tell other men that they were hunting animals, and they started to paint what they were doing. In the Lascaux caves in France, you have this beautiful communication project, because this is what they were doing. They were communicating. Instead of using words, they were using images. Then a few thousand years later, the second turning point was the invention of writing, and that was another communication project, very important. Then fast forward to the 15th century, we have the invention of the press from Gutenberg, and that was another moment when the transmission of messages changed in a way that was difficult to imagine at the time. This was supposed to be the most important revolution in history, and for a certain time, a few centuries, actually, that was the key turning point in the history of communication, till the moment when this guy, Tim Berners-Lee, in 1990, started the first website. So basically invented the internet, even if internet was already there because it started from a military project in the US in the 1960s. But this is the beginning of something interesting, and I would argue that this is the 4th major turning point in the history of communication. What is interesting is that for a decade, in the 90s, not so many things happened. There wasn't this acceleration that we have lived in the past 20 years. But starting at the beginning of this century, somehow everything has accelerated. What happened? Why? Well, first of all, everything was free, was kind of just a place where you were posted whatever you had in the 90s. Internet was just another way of telling the others what you were doing. So newspapers were posting everything for free. Companies were posting their own inventory for free. But I mean, in the end, it was just a nice place where we can look at things without so much interaction. Then at the dawn of the century, something changed because there was, first of all, an acceleration from new players. Amazon was born in the 1990s, but started to be very big at the beginning of the century. Google was born in 1999, so exactly immediately before the beginning of the century. New players that you still have today, other players that you don't know about probably, that have been forgotten, but were really important. In 2002, the people of your age started to exchange music from one computer to another using this software called Napster. Basically, Napster was an opportunity for everybody to get free music. From my PC to your PC, I have music in an MP3 format, which is digital music, and I can freely exchange music. This was a very important moment because the music industry was absolutely upset and terrified by this opportunity, because this was basically destroying the entire business model of the music industry. And there was it's a moment when you have your digital, let's say, the CD was the physical place where your music was stored, and suddenly disappeared. So no more a physical place for your own music, something that started to be completely digital. It took a few years for Apple to reinvent the ecosystem of music with the iPod, and reinvent even a business model with iTunes and with everything else that happened after that. But that was the beginning of the streaming phenomenon, which meant that music was free to move around and wasn't anymore linked to a physical object like the CD. I don't know if you have CD anymore. There are no more even CD players, not even in the cars. So maybe your parents still have some CDs, but now music is basically something that you listen to on digital devices. The same with the video, and this happened with the DVD. That the VHS, it's even before, but the DVD disappeared in the same years because of the same phenomenon, because there was the digital transformation of an entire industry, which is the movie industry. And you have some winners here, which are the winners that we still have today. There are also some losers, as it happens every time you have some kind of a revolution. You may remember when you were young, probably if you wanted to watch a movie, your parents were going out to a place where they can rent it, some DVD and maybe some cookies and popcorn together, which was this place here. And it has disappeared now. It's no more there. Blockbuster was a huge chain all around the world, disappeared together with the DVD itself. There is a key moment in these 20 years, which is the 2006-2008 period. Why is this a key moment? Because many things happened together during this time. First of all, you had the explosion of blogs and aggregators. Blogs were basically the opportunity for everybody to be a journalist somehow. Remember, there weren't social media at the time yet. So with a blog, you could tell the others what you wanted to tell about yourself, and was a way for everybody to become a journalist and a publisher. In the same time, you had Google disassembling the media world using Google News as an aggregator. So they were picking stories from the leading news organizations, and they were reorganizing stories without let's say the kind of hierarchy that the media business were using. So in the end, what happened? That everything had the same kind of importance. A blog and an article from the New York Times started to be somehow the same for people of your generation, which is a very significant phenomenon, because of course the New York Times is a leading news organization, spending a lot of money to propose, let's say, quality journalism and sending, for example, journalists to cover wars. A blogger could be somebody, everybody could be a blogger inside his own house. How do you decide who you want to trust? How do you decide who is more important between a blogger and the New York Times? Well, the aggregators were destroying that kind of difference. So it was an important moment. Then there was this day, September 26, 2006, when Mark Zuckerberg decided to open Facebook to everybody. This is how Facebook looked like, how Facebook looked like in 2006, a little bit different from today. But at the time, Facebook, which was born in 2004, was something that was used only inside universities. And basically, let's say it was born to rate girls from the point of view of who was prettier or not. So instead, in 2006, Facebook became a world phenomenon, open to everybody. And still in 2006, these four guys in San Francisco started Twitter, which gave everybody the opportunity to send around news in a few, in just a few words. And in just a few years, even the President of the United States was using Twitter to communicate with the rest of the world. Everything started in 2006. Then in 2008, something else happened. The most important economic crisis in probably 100 years, the Wall Street crash of Lehman Brothers, followed by a lot of problems all around the world. So you have this moment when there is a lot of innovation, you have a big economic recession, a big economic problem, and this is the moment when you have a huge disruption, because it's the perfect storm for a disruption. Also because there was something else. There is a key device that exploded and became very important in 2006, 2008. At that time, in those years, in 2006, you were still very young, all of us, we were calling our telephone devices cell phone. But at a certain point, we started to call them smartphone. But we didn't know what makes smart a phone. There was a lot of discussion. These were the smartphones of 2006, the BlackBerry, something that you could use to send one email in your life, and that was already something absolutely amazing from a certain point of view. Till a moment in January 2007, when in San Francisco, Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone. And that was the moment when the world discovered what it means for a phone to be smart. It means that you have in one device a second life, something that can connect you with the rest of the world. And in this device, everything that has happened in the years before basically found the place to be. So the digital revolution of the previous year had the synthesis into the iPhone and then the other smartphone that arrived later, Samsung and so on. So this is a key moment, and it's also the moment when even the newspaper business, the media business started to realize that they had a problem because they were losing any kind of revenue because everything was becoming digital, everything was for free. and the smartphone accelerated this process. The economic crisis accelerated it even more. So it was the moment when, for example, we started to think about the possibility that newspapers were going to disappear. This is what the revenue, the advertising revenue of the American newspapers that peaked in 2006, 2007, and then started to crash. The print revenue started to crash because Google and Facebook were basically collecting all the money that used to be in the newspaper business. But at the same time, the same media companies started to find a new model, started to have a digital approach to the point that today you have the New York Times, which is able to reach much more people than before, but in a digital format, not more in print, which is becoming just a small part of their own production. So, having said that, after these 20 years, where are we now? We are in the age of the great distraction, let's say. Why distraction? Because this transformation has been so fast that we are overwhelmed by content. You have so many choices that it's difficult to decide who you want to follow, who you want to trust, how I want to make my mind about what is happening all around, because your thumb every day runs for more than 90 meters on your own small screens, trying to see what's going on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, and so on and so on. So the scarcity of this moment is your own attention. The scarcity that companies, the media business, and everybody else is trying to face is how to get people care, how to get the attention in a world where there is so much content. What are the communication trends that are emerging at this point after the transformation that we are going on? There is a need, and there is also, for sure, a much more attention to the quality of our own time. Exactly because time is something that we lack a lot. We are always trying to follow what's going on, and time is becoming a scarcity. So I'm giving my time when I'm running those 19 meters on the small screen. I'm stopping. I'm giving my time to you if it really matters. If there is some quality in what I'm doing. There is more than before let's say the trend of telling stories, which is a nice trend and something that is not particularly new in the history of humanity. From Homer till today, telling a story is the best way to communicate. But today, to get the attention, it's more important to tell a story probably than just giving some numbers. There is the personalization of your own information and communication. I want my information, I want my communication that is exactly what I'm looking for. So you have many choices. I want to know only about this sport or this fashion trend because this is what is interesting to me. And of course, the risk here is to close yourself inside niches where everybody thinks like yourself, and it's difficult to find some kind of serendipity, some kind of different thinking. But personalization is also something positive somehow. Traffic is not so important as before. Traffic meaning the traffic on the website, even brands, even news organizations are just in the past few years, they used to look at how many people are coming to watch what I'm doing. Now is more, how do I engage the people that are coming? So engagement is becoming more interesting because of the lack of attention that is out there. Users, they don't want to be users anymore. They want to be members. Each of us want to be part of a club. We want to be part of a community. There is this trend that is linked to the idea that I want to be part of the University of Padua community somehow, and so I want an information that is tailored to the community I belong to. Fake versus paid, this is a warning for you guys, for your own generation. If you pay for something, it's possible that is more credible than something that is given for free. If something is for free, you are the product. So there is this, it's not always true, but it's a good, let's say, test for example, the communication that you are receiving. Everything that is for free is because you are giving back something else. You are giving back your privacy, your contacts, your ideas. If you pay for something in this new ecosystem and new environment, it's probably something that you will probably get back, something more credible. And then finally, big data is not so important. We were excited about the possibility to access to a lot of data. Now we have too much data, so now the focus is on relevant data. I have to find inside the amount. It's like the content that we were mentioning before. We have too much content. I have to find relevant content. Now we have too much data, and I want to find relevant data. What does it mean for business and marketing? I have some more time. What does it mean? What has happened in the past few years? Well, a few things. First of all, just because you are not necessarily communication students, just a very quick 2 slides. The 2 most important slides that you have to keep in mind today are probably this one, which is the ugliest slide I have. But each of us and every company, when it's communicated, is basically made of these 3 things. You have your own identity, who I am, what I have to say, what is my story, what is my heritage, what is my experience. That's my identity. And it's the same for a company. What is my mission? What are my values as a company? What is the story of this company? So this is the identity. You try to reach customers or other people through everything that is here explained as brand. Brand means the way in which I communicate. Could be advertising, could be media relations, could be social media, and so on. So through all these channels, I try to tell everybody about my identity. This is what you do every day, and this is what companies are doing with their own brands. The problem is the third part of this, which is reputation. You don't own your own reputation, and the companies, they don't own their own reputation. Reputation is the people owning the reputations are those listening to the message that the brand is sending. So in this moment, you own my reputation. You can think, look, what kind of strange things this guy is telling us. I don't understand a thing, and he's probably very confused. This is my reputation in this moment with you. Or there's something interesting in what he's telling us. So I don't have any control on my reputation. I have control of my identity and the way in which I communicate my identity, so the brand part. The brand part is something that I can, from the point of view of channels, use in basically 4 ways. Paid media, which is, this is from the point of view of companies, of course. Paid media is basically advertising. I pay for to advertise what I'm doing. So I'm paying a TV networks or a newspaper or something else to tell my story, to tell who I am, my identity, my brand. Earned media is basically what the companies are doing with media relations. I give interviews to journalists, and if they are interested in what I'm trying to tell them, they will write about me. I don't pay them, but they will think that I'm newsworthy. Then there is shared media, which is the entire environment of the social media. And all media is what I control myself, my website, my magazine, my social media profiles. So basically, the identity and the brand is where you can do something. What is happening in the past few years is that companies are working more, and we will get there in a second, on identity than on brand. Instead, in the past, was different. Why is reputation so important? Because reputation is basically value that you are creating. These are the most reputable companies in the world. This is a list from 2020, but it's still the same today. And it's amazing to see that the most reputable company in the world today is a company that is producing pieces of plastic, basically. So with all the discussion about climate change, they are a company of plastic production. Why do they have this very good reputation? Because they tell their story very well. They are telling how they are changing. They are telling the transformation they went through. They are credible because they are authentic. Lego, a few years ago, tried to be something else. They tried to go into the video game business, and it didn't pay because people didn't want Lego to be a video game company. They just wanted to be what probably each of you has experienced when you were very young, blocks to build something. So it's interesting to see, I wanted to go back, but it doesn't go back. It's interesting to see that list. So you have Lego, you have the entertainment business, Disney and Netflix. You have the luxury brands, Ferrari and Rolex. You have a lot of brands with a reputation that is linked to the way in which they tell their own story and the way in which they convince consumers that the identity they have is very strong and is credible. So from the point of view of business and marketing, the trends that are linked to this scenario that we have seen, let's go fast here. Again, this is 2007, Steve Jobs. Digital transformation has been something huge for the entire business world. If somebody in the business world has not yet transformed his own business for the digital age, it's probably too late. But the digital transformation has been a very deep and important transformation for everybody. Then there is this ugly word, platformization, which means that we are in a world today where big platforms are deciding what we are doing more and more. Big platforms means Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and so on. There is, in the digital world today, there is the trend toward big players that are running the show, let's say. There is a transformation from the importance of the technological aspect toward a more beautiful design of what we are doing. Think of companies like Airbnb, Nike, and Uber, and so on. They are not just very good at the technology, they are even beautiful. So there is a lot of attention to design because that's part of the story I'm telling. From the point of view of the marketing, a very important thing that is happening is this change from what I'm trying to sell to who I am. So this idea that you should start from why you're doing business, not just what you are selling. This is why Lego has such a huge reputation. because they start from why and not just from the kind of products I'm trying to promote. And this is something that is changing a lot in the past few years, together with the idea that I need a very clear purpose for what I'm doing. We go back to the identity. Am I doing this business just because I want to make profit, or am I trying to change the world? Do I want to make the world better? So if you start from purpose, of course, everything that you do from the point of view of fighting climate change, to discrimination, human rights, and so on, gets a different perspective. And the consequence of this is that brands now are doing a lot of activism. They are promoting big things, not just their own products. They are promoting stories. Now, I don't want to use there is a video here, but you can watch it by yourself, otherwise I'm taking too much time. Look at the Jeep advertisement last year that was introduced at the American Super Bowl. Bruce Springsteen was doing that advertising. It was the first time Bruce Springsteen was doing an advertise. It was immediately after the Capitol turmoil in Washington, D.C. So in a country very divided, Bruce Springsteen did an advertise for a car, where the car was the less interesting thing at all. He was telling a story about a small church in the center of the United States, in Lebanon, Kansas, which is the exact middle of the United States. And the message was, we have to find a middle ground. We have to find a point where we can put together our differences. So let's get together and be the reunited States of America. That was a very political message in a moment where the country was really divided. And the message was by Jeep, that in the end they have to sell cars, but instead they were selling an idea. The challenge now is not just talking to the market, but talking to the entire society. Because of all the things that has happened in the past few years, there are companies that are measuring trust every year, and they see that business now is more trustworthy than government, NGOs, and media. There's more trust in big companies than in your own government. This is why CEOs, leaders of companies, now they feel they have the responsibility to raise their own voice in front of everything that is happening. They see this analysis where you see business is here considered more ethical and more competent than the NGOs, the media, and not talk about the government, which are over there. This is also the effect of what has happened in 2020 with the COVID crisis. People want business to be more engaged in every kind of topic today. So it's no more just selling a product. When we help as a company, society to create their own communication, now we don't just stop at the moment where they have to sell a product. We have to help them to find their own place in the discussion that is going on at a general level. And I'm almost finished, but this is why companies will and are raising their own voices on so many different topics. They will engage and speak up. Brand activism is a huge phenomenon of the past few years. So this is why you see Elon Musk raising his own voice because of the Ukraine war today. And the Ukraine crisis has been an interesting testing ground for companies, because you have Airbnb that is not just promoting their own offer, but they are offering houses, help us to offer house to the Ukraine people. You have IKEA closing their own stores in Russia. You have Nokia taking position on what the Russian government is doing. You have Nike deciding to close their own activities there, and so on and so on, H&M, Zalando, Walt Disney. This is really something new, and you will see this more and more in the 20s, in the next few years, because of what we have seen before. I have just a few things about the future, but maybe I will stop a little bit here, and then we will. Do you want me to go?
You can go ahead, I think. Yeah.
Okay, no, because I don't want to lose the opportunity for you to ask questions, but just in a few slides, what's next? So we have seen a huge digital transformation in the past 20 years. This digital transformation has transformed our own lives in so many different ways, but it's also transforming a lot the way in which we communicate. There is a crisis from the part of the news media. There are new opportunities for brands to raise their own voice and to be part of the discussion also on political issues. And I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I'm not making judgment. I'm just telling you that in the future, you will see more and more companies not just selling you sneakers or other products, but telling you how they take position on a certain topic. And this is because of all the different things we have seen. What can we expect? Well, it depends what the next technological developments will be. There are a few keywords that are on the mouth of everybody in this moment. Blockchain is one. So the possibility to create smart contracts, to develop a different approach to production, but also to communication, because of, we are not going into what the blockchain is. We have experts here, we can ask them. But the blockchain is a key element of the discussion about the future of communication at the moment. The same for NFTs, the possibility to own your own digital properties because of the blockchain, and to develop digital products in a way that is very related to this new environment, to the new smart contract world, is creating a lot of buzz inside the business world, is also creating for sure a lot of new opportunities for companies to communicate and to take position on what they are doing. Third word, of course, it's important today, cryptocurrencies, which are the most controversial part of this new environment, but of course are the currency that is now used to make the transitions that we have just seen with blockchain and NFTs. Then, of course, there is the metaverse, which is on the at the center of the attention since when last year Mark Zuckerberg transformed Facebook into a company that is now called Meta. Metaverse is not something completely new. You see here Snow Crash, which was a cyber novel from the 90s, probably 1994, and this is when for the first time the word metaverse has been used. But metaverse is something that has to be defined completely, something that we still have to understand. But of course, when you have a company like Facebook moving 7,000 engineers from the social media platform they have toward the development of the metaverse, you can expect a lot of activities in the next few years. When you have Microsoft buying for a huge amount of money a game company, you can expect that even Microsoft, which is one of the most traditional companies in the digital world, will move towards something different. What is this different word? Somebody is calling it Web3, you can call it Metaverse, you can call it a mix of the two. I'm not an expert, and I cannot tell you where we are going, if this is the beginning of a Web3 or not. If we consider the 90s, the Web 1, and the actual time, the Web 2, Web3 could be next thing. For sure, from the point of view of what I'm doing, which is helping companies to communicate, there are a lot of interesting opportunities and ideas moving around linked to this, let's say, to this crossroads between blockchain, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, virtual reality, augmented reality, and the metaverse. So if you put together all these different ingredients, you have something that is developing a lot. From the point of view of the communication, what is interesting is the idea that probably we will go toward an ecosystem where you are the owner of your own digital place. So it's like we have been for these past 20 years, kind of people renting space from somebody else. Now we are living in these huge buildings where we are renters, and the landlord is changing the rules every time, and the privacy is not so good, and I want to buy my own house, and now probably I have the opportunity to be the owner of my own place. So companies are organizing toward this opportunity. What does it mean to be the owner in the digital world? I still don't know how this will work, but for sure there is a lot of activities going on toward the possibility to develop new environments where I can control my message from the point of view of communication. I can control my narrative much more than what I can do today, where I have to be hosted by in a space where there is another company in charge. So if I'm a company and I want to reach you, I go on Facebook or I go on TikTok. But as a company, I don't own Facebook and TikTok. Facebook and TikTok are other companies, and they have their own business model. They have their own targets, and they have their own business. So if you now can think of the possibility to create a place where I'm the owner, this could change a little bit again, even the communication environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco. You gave us both a picture of yourself, your history, your personal trajectory, and even a look at the future. Thank you. Let's see whether there are any questions. Oh, there's one, please. You can move your mask just for sake of clarity.
My question is, what is your point of view about the process of politicization in companies, and what would be the possible consequences on the long run, and what's the impact on political institutions like law systems? So even in democracies, and also authoritarian regimes.
So before we move to the answer, I think you just want to I can either summarize or you can summarize the question, because
for people following from home,
if you don't
the
mind.
question was about the politicization of what the company are doing. What is my opinion on what they are doing from the political point of view, how this can change even our own democracies, and what is the scenario? I'm trying to summarize what you were asking. Well, first of all, I think companies have always done politics somehow, more or less. There were some that were trying to stay away from everything that was controversial. There were others that actually were moving political decisions without having to take position. Think of the energy companies around the world. Energy is basically politics. So if you are in the oil and gas business, even in the renewable business, what you are doing with your own actions as a company, it's also useful to lobby for your own activities. The difference today is that, first of all, companies are doing this much more, and then they have many more opportunities to do this. I would say that there is, if you're asking me my opinion, I would say that there is a transparency today in the digital environment. There is the possibility to check what companies are saying that is much more than in the past. So if you as a company want to take position on something, it's better that you have done your homework very well, because I, as a consumer, as a member of the community, can check very well what you are actually doing. If you as a company want to take position on climate change, I can accuse you of greenwashing because I can double check what you are doing much better and much more than what I could do in the past. So there is this double reading on this phenomenon. I think it's interesting for companies to raise their own voices because they have the possibility to put some topics at the center of the attention. The starting of this phenomenon of brand activism, the most important probably episode was when football player Colin Kaepernick decided to challenge the NFL, which is the football league in the United States, kneeling during the national anthem as a gesture of solidarity toward the Black Lives Matter movement. Was a political gesture from a player. Many other players followed him, but in the end he was kicked out from the league. And Nike decided to make him its own testimonial. So you can browse the web and find those advertisements where Colin Kaepernick is the Nike testimonial. And I don't remember exactly the wording, but basically Nike was saying it's important the most important thing is your willingness to risk everything you have for an idea. And of course, Nike has to sell sneakers not just to Democrats, but also to Republicans in the United States. So if you decide to do something like this, you are taking a position because it was basically a position against then President Trump. And they decided to do that because they wanted to be authentic with their own identity. And actually they sold more sneakers than before. So it wasn't something that damaged their own business, actually helped their own business. So it's interesting to see how, if you do something, you take a position that people decide that is absolutely authentic because of your own identity, they will reward you from a certain point of view. If you are taking a position and you are not authentic, if you are talking about gender equality and then you have a board of directors which is made only of men, and you don't have a woman running the company, you cannot talk about gender equality and so on. No? So, having said that, my opinion is that it's an interesting thing. I'm not considering necessarily completely a positive phenomenon, but it's interesting how each of us can do can verify the message that is coming from companies, and we can boycott them if we don't like them. So they are risking. We cannot boycott them.
Sure.
No, because with respect to this that you are saying, there is an example of a colleague, Timid Chido, that was working in Google and it was actually promoting, unbiased algorithm for, for the development of a more righteous kind of classification against the different type of bias. But then she realized, working inside the company, that the message was not genuine. Absolutely. It was only like because everybody must say something. Okay, there is, and so she started to try to make a movement and to sensibilize about this, but the end of the story is not very happy in the sense that
they fired her.
Yes, she's not working anymore there, and of course and also she described the kind of pressure on this big G and also the structure. These are states. Absolutely. Basically, so you never.
But
so,
you have that series, that movie that was done by Netflix on this phenomenon. I don't know if she was in the movie, but many people were describing in the movie what Facebook is doing, what Google is doing. It's true that they haven't changed the way completely, the way in which Google is working. But I can tell you, because I have a daughter working in Google, I can tell you that they have now policies that probably they didn't have before. So something probably has happened because they were paying a reputational price for what was being said about them. Then there is this other phenomenon, very interesting phenomenon, that you have Netflix doing a movie on how these tech companies are manipulating our own privacy. And you say, Netflix, they know everything about ourselves. They know much more than Facebook knows about us. And they were promoting a movie about how Facebook is violating privacy. So keep your eyes open. I think we have to keep in mind what are the cons. So there are pros and cons, and there are many cons for sure in this moment. I'm wondering, and I don't know, how this new world that is developing could help from this point of view, because the blockchain, the idea that you have to leave traces of what you're doing at a digital level in a different way, all of this could be positive, or maybe will create another environment where big platforms will run the show even in the future. I don't know.
Sure, please. Yes, please.
And a question arises in my mind during all these things, and is how can we keep up with all these changes in the world? Like I'm struggling to do it, and I'm free. I'm studying in university, and my mother and my father probably wouldn't ever know about these things. And so I'm thinking that these kind of changes are quite homogeneous in our society, and only a few people will live this change directly. And how is it affecting all the other 90% of the population, which will not directly live
Well, the question is about, let me summarize it into the digital divide somehow.
There are journalists, you'll be able to summarize, right?
The digital divide problem, there are those of us which are with more digital experience, but without so much time to follow everything that is happening. There are our parents that probably are risking to be left behind because they don't have that kind of a capacity. There are a lot of people, you were saying 90% of the people maybe are not updated on this. How can we follow everything that is happening? Well, I think that the digital divide, the difference between the different levels of our own digital experience is one of the most important topics, particularly for politics today, and particularly after what we have experienced with the pandemic, the smart working approach, in the education world, at schools, but also here in universities, you see a difference between people that can access information and access, for example, lessons without a problem, and many others that don't have the same kind of tools or the same kind of knowledge to access a digital environment where they are supposed to stay because they cannot be in presence here. This is a huge problem because it's creating a difference, a chasm, which is even from the democracy point of view, very, very risky. I don't have, of course, an answer for this because it's such a big question. I think that this should be, and it is, a key topic where we should judge, for example, our governments, our politicians, and so on. How are they taking care of this transformation? We should also check what companies are doing. For example, TLC company, a company in charge of telecommunications, they are also in charge of bringing fast internet to each of us. Are they doing that, or are they just trying to make more money? This goes back to the idea of purpose. What is the purpose of a TLC company today? Are they in the business just to make profit, or should they help us to live a better life, giving us a better experience in our own digital world? So it's a huge topic that I think is not necessarily something that should concern you guys personally, because you are naturally open to this innovation. Even if you don't understand what is happening, even if you think that you are not following what is happening, but for the way in which you were raised in this digital environment, it's much easier for you than for me to follow new developments naturally, without having to think about too much. It's like my daughters, they spent 10 years in the United States. I'm still struggling, as you say, with English. They speak English naturally among themselves. Even if we came back from the US 10 years ago, the three of them, they're still speaking English among themselves, because it's the natural language for them, is the language where they were playing with their own friends. For you, digital is the same thing. You don't have to be concerned, because digital comes easy to you guys, even if you think, madam, I'm just focusing on my own books and my studying. How can I follow blockchain or NFTs? Don't worry. Those things will reach you without having you to understand them. And you will be much faster than us to understand what they mean.
May I ask you a question, picking up from what you just asked? So the standard picture of the relation between political power, economic power, and us is usually saddening. I'm not talking as a public lawyer. So you see government being able to curtail and affect human rights. You see economic powers controlling us through technologies and influencing political powers. But the picture you're painting is somehow different. You seem to be saying, look guys, the companies, of course, are very strong, but also they can heed your call and try to comply with the priorities that you have. And sometimes complying with the priorities that you have is going to pay off for you and for them, because they're going to heed your call and they're going to make money, like Nike. So it seems to me that instead of just being passive recipients of what is being given to us by companies and governments, you're also saying we are the influencers too, in the sense that we, of course, we can vote, but also by engaging in social media activities and deciding to shop certain types of sneakers or another, we are also influencing them. And so I wanted to pick up on that because this might help us understand something that's been going on for a while since the war started, okay, in Ukraine. So when you saw many countries taking stands and companies taking stands, and of course the few view I spoke about basically goes something like this. Oh, look at what they are doing. They are trying to force us to believe that there's sort of human rights versus violence, whereas it's always a matter of economic strength and balance of economic powers. You seem to be saying, well, it's not just like that. It might be the case that there's a global opinion that is opposed to the war, and this is really pushing governments and companies to try to shore up what's happening in Ukraine and force the Ukraine crisis to stop. Is it the way you would portray that?
Yeah, I would say so. I totally agree with the idea that all of us, we are influencers, and we can influence much more than we think. It's the same power that we have with our own vote when we are voting at the elections. Somehow now we have a similar power with companies that in turn have power on the public opinion, on governments and so on. So I don't know if it's the public opinion influences companies or vice versa. But for sure, I think that something like the war in Ukraine, if something like this was happening 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't think we would have seen such an immediate reaction from companies. McDonald's closing all the restaurants in Russia, Nike, Apple, everybody closing all their own activities. I don't think 10, 15 years ago that would have been the case, because it wasn't so fast, the reaction from the public opinion. And now it's fast because in this digital environment, everybody can influence what the companies are doing, what the governments are doing, somehow moving around some kind of huge collective judgment that can really change things in bad and in worse. So it's not necessarily completely a positive phenomenon. I mean, if you are in Russia, you have a different perspective. And it's how free are you to influence your government now in Russia? Probably not so much. But for sure, what people are doing in making companies taking position is related to something more than just the idea that I have to take a position in general. It's something that goes deeper. There is this idea that in a company speech is called brand employment. There is this idea that people like you won't work in the future for companies that you don't like. Usually, when my generation was looking for a job, we were asking, how's the money? What kind of bonuses are you giving me? Do I have some kind of benefits? Is there a car that is involved in the transaction? How is my office? Those are the dreams of your parents' generation. Instead, there is a new generation, which is you, who is, I don't know if it's your case, but I'm seeing this a lot, who is not willing to work for companies that whose values that you don't share. So there could be a company that can give you a lot of money, but maybe you don't want to work with them because you don't like the way in which they take position on climate change, on environment, on human rights, on gender equality, and so on and so on. So companies now are having this problem. They are having a problem of recruiting people, talent, that don't just believe in the business model of the company, but believe also in the mission, the values, the ideals that the company stands for. So they have to decide what they stand for. And deciding what they stand for, they are making a political judgment. So we are influencing those decisions, even from the point of view, not just of buying products, but also deciding where we want to work. There is this phenomenon of the so-called great resignation that is going on in the United States, but in part also in Italy. Many young people that decided to resign, to leave the job place because they have discovered during the smart working time that they can live a different life and that they want to have more control of their own activities. So they decided to be freelancer. They decided to work for different companies, but as independent workers. This is something that is changing the business world a lot, and I think it's related to all the different phenomena that we were describing before.
See if there's anyone else. Shall we wrap up? Oh, sure, I'm sorry, didn't see you, please. You can take off your mask.
I have two questions, actually. The first one is that it seems from the exposition and in general from social media that brands only stand for safe options like Black Lives Matter or the war in Ukraine, but they never stand over something that is more risky. Nobody talked about the question about, for example, Palestine and Israel that was concerning last year topics. And also, I have the other question is, you speak about influencing, but it seems like with social media, we are losing like unicity. We are not only influencing, but also we are losing ourselves. It seems like we are not something, but we are the crowd.
Absolutely. Well, two very important questions. She's asking, first of all, brands looks like they are taking always the safe position. If they want to raise their voice, they are raising their voice only for topics where they think there is a general consensus or where they think there is the majority of people is following them, or topics that are the center of the attention. You were mentioning the Israel-Palestina conflict, which is not at the center of the attention today, so nobody is taking position from the brand point of view on that. And the second question was, it sounds like we don't have this much freedom of expressing ourselves in the social media environment because we are changing your words, but we are polarized. Each of us is basically closed in his own community where everybody is thinking the same. We don't have much freedom of expressing ourselves in the social media. Well, I agree with both the things you were saying. For sure, companies are taking position on safe bets. Sometimes not so safe, because as I was mentioning before, taking position on Black Lives Matter in the United States during the Trump administration was creating a lot of problems to companies that had to sell products also to half of the country that elected the president. But for sure, there is a mainstream position, let's say that. There is still a mainstream idea of how things should go in the world. And the problem today is deciding who is creating the mainstream. In the past, in the recent past, those were the media, the newspapers, the TV, and so on. Today is much more difficult to understand how the mainstream position is developing because it's much more fragmented. So the mainstream position has created by the same social media that are part of the problem somehow. So it's difficult to understand where you should position yourself. What I can tell you is that companies are listening a lot. They are using a lot of tools to try to detect sentiment and emotions from the general audience. And I can tell from experience because in the company where I was working, I have created a team that was exactly working only on this, listening to the social media, the blog, the digital environment, and trying to detect what the general opinion is about a certain topic. So the result is that you listen to the environment and you decide what is mainstream. And then as a company, you decided that that position, which is the mainstream position, is closer to your values than other positions. I think the problem here is not how brands are acting. The problem is to decide what is mainstream, in my opinion, because today it's difficult to have a hierarchy of the importance of the news, for example. So is more mainstream a position on the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, that says everybody should get a vaccination, or a no-vax position, which has a lot of coverage on the media, and I don't have enough. In the past, I used to have a hierarchy of the importance of the news that could help me to make my own judgment in a different way. And today, everybody seems to have some kind of reason. So there are good reasons on one side, good reasons on the other. I don't have the possibility to judge what is best for me. I'm generalizing, but the key point is to understand better how the mainstream position is developing in this time, which is a big question, which is related to your second question, because how free are we to express ourselves in the social media environment, for example? Well, we are free to the point, the limit are the algorithms that are creating that space of discussion for us. Those algorithms tends to put you closer to the people that is of the same mind of yourself. So the risk is this polarization that we are seeing. We are not exposed, like in the past, to people thinking differently from us. This is the biggest risk I see, because if I always talk to people that is rooting for my own soccer team, football team, it's easy, but I don't understand reasons and ideas from people that are rooting for a different team. This is a very important risk of the moment, which is why I'm curious to see what will happen in the next few years, because I want to understand if the future we have is still something like this, where our life is controlled by different algorithms, or we will have some more options and to be a little bit more free. I don't know, but I'm always positive usually, and so I'm waiting to see what will happen.
Okay, I think we can wrap up. I think that Marco Bardazzi deserves another round of applause. If you
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us and bringing some optimism despite some kind of sadness among our students.
No.
Thank you so much, and good luck on your enterprise at this
Thank
stage.
you.
Okay,
Thank you for your time. Good luck with your studies. Thank you. No, it's there. Thank you. No, the camera is there. I was doing this here.